Let's connect to Instagram as well. Let's connect to Facebook, MySpace. Let's get all the social media.
We might as well get it all going. But here we are live. Hey, how's it going, everybody? We are here with some very, very special guests. We have Randy Chavez, the legend. We have Taps Trades and Jeremy Padawer.
Yo,
how you all doing?
Doing well. I was practicing my Leonardo DiCaprio face from Wolf of Wall Street after he says, like, I'm not heckin' selling, like in the car on the way home, and someone like looked at me while I was doing it, and they're like, and I was like, please change your life.
It would have been great if you just started like going like, and then they started doing it in their car too. Like,
nah, she was a girl. I don't know if she would have. Maybe she would have seen it. Girls can be into finance too, especially with Leo.
They can. Fun fact.
Hold on 1 second. The stream is saying the echo is real. Like, who's echoing? What part is echoing?
That might be me.
You might want to turn down the volume on Twitter, like it reverting back, but you can still talk through Twitter.
Okay, I am doing the both.
Do you all still hear the echo, y'all?
I don't hear any echo.
Oh, all right, cool.
Echo on YouTube. We good?
There is so much stuff behind you, Jeremy, that I'm just like, it looks like you're like in a bunker full of collectibles.
That's very fair, Taps, because I have spent my entire life either creating collectible systems or collecting other people's collectible systems. So after a while, you end up in a bunker of your own making. I'm actually in my home office right now and enjoying the day.
I love it. My collection behind me definitely needs to scale up compared to yours.
That's what time is for. The beautiful thing about life is that it passes and you get to decide how to live it. And if one of the things that you get to do is choose digital and physical collectibles, you know what? It'll come with a lot of happiness and some challenges as well.
Love it.
And what do you got? I see like the Leaning Tower of Pisa behind you. What is that thing, Taps?
Oh, the sword?
Oh.
So
wait, are you?
I'm a huge anime nerd, and so like I've cosplayed my whole life, and that's the Buster sword from Cloud or Kingdom Hearts version, but Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, so I made that for a cosplay, and so I was like, what kind of weird crap can I put behind me in my videos? And that's what that is.
That's outstanding.
Thank you.
And it could scare the living crap out of anybody that tries to come into your place to bother you.
That's who needs a gun when you have a Buster sword?
You don't need anything if you've got that. I mean, you barely. Yeah. I mean, here you just might get tased. Where you are, you're gonna end up in pieces.
Yes, exactly. Love it. Well, y'all ready to kick things off? I see we have a bunch of people in Twitter Spaces. We have some folks on YouTube, so we're multitasking here. So thanks everyone for hopping on and for dealing with us while we get all this set up. But we're lucky enough to have Jeremy Padawer with us. We've got the real Randy Chavez. We've got the real Cavell Anderson, and myself. So happy to get into some of it, and I'm sure a lot of people want to be hopping on to ask you some questions.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Let's get it, man. So where should we start at?
You want me to kick us off? I wrote down some. I was like, what questions do I want to when I like now that I have time with Jeremy? Do I want to ask him? So I'm happy to start us off.
Yeah, let's get it. Go ahead.
All right. So, I mean, I always do a little bit of social creeping just to kind of do some research on who I'm talking to, right? So I saw, Jeremy Jazzware announced that you are the chief brand officer this month. Congrats. So I'm curious, like having that role, what are your responsibilities and, what do you want to create with Jazzwares in 2022 and beyond?
So first off, so we created, a toy company in 2012 called Wicked Cool Toys. Mm-hmm. And that was acquired in 2019 by Allegheny Capital and Jazzwares. Jazzwares being a toy company, Allegheny Capital being like a big investment holding company, kind of like a Berkshire Hathaway. And we were acquired because we were really crushing it, man. We focused on gaming and social media, kind of where the other guys weren't. And we had global partnerships with Pokemon and Cocomelon and some remarkable brands, just incredible brands, Halo, Micro Machines. But over the last 2.5 years since acquisition, together we acquired Squishmallows, which turned out to be one of the biggest properties of all time. Like, we've sold 150 million units of the plush. And now we're right up against being the 5th largest toy company, which is amazing because the top 3, Lego, Mattel, and Hasbro, you can kind of roll right off your tongue. But when you get up into that rare air, you know, not only is it remarkable, but it's also, you know, it's something that we have to work really hard now to make sure we keep that going. So, you know, managing a company of this scale, a couple things. Number one, you have to constantly be living in the future because you have to look for new platforms, new areas that kids and adult collectors are going to be, and not just live in the year that you're currently in and celebrating the good stuff that's happening. So right now I am aggressively speaking with NFT programs and people who are launching new pieces of content that we could potentially invest in, and inventors who have the next big toy property that we get to see, and major media companies that are launching TV shows. And we're just being very aggressive about finding the next thing that's on a professional level. The chief brand officer was, you know, very nice. You know, I'm thrilled to have that role in a big public company like Allegheny has brought to the table with Jazzwares. But also, I'm fully aware that you know, when we sold, I could have run towards the sunset and enjoyed the rest of my life, just kind of like, I don't even know. I'm not sure what that would have been like, but I love this category so much. I love toys. I love collectibles, and I love what's happening now. You know, digital collectibles are no threat to physical collectibles whatsoever. It's a new layer. It's like an onion that has a new layer on it. All the old layers are still there. It's just deeper now. It's more substantive. There's more context. There's more opportunity to form relationships and friendships like we have. And it's just an exciting time as a collector, and it's an exciting time as an investor, and it's an exciting time as someone who creates collectible systems and toy lines.
That's awesome to hear. And you mentioned Squishmallows too, which I saw that you can now have Squishmallows in Roblox, which that's an awesome partnership to have. I mean, like, you're already starting with, you know, one of the most well-known outside of crypto metaverse gaming projects, and Squishmallows is now a part of it.
Yeah, so we're the global partner for Roblox on their toy side, and we started essentially a division in our company that creates Roblox games and experiences. And so we started with one that we own, Squishmallows, and our concurrent users are really remarkable. We're seeing a fantastic use, and the game is great. We brought in these 2 young, really knowledgeable people who know how to code in that Roblox specific language. And it's taught me a lot about what to expect now from different age groups. And I'll describe what I mean by that. Like, I've never been one to look at someone and say, you're too young or you're too old for anything. I think everyone brings their perspective to the table. But certainly, we're in a very unusual time where you can be 19 years old and be the most experienced person in the room in a particular area. Now, try to put that into it. It used to be you're 19, you might be a protege, like someone who's like beyond what you would expect. But no, now you have 19-year-olds that have more experience because they've had a deeper dive into a particular category. Now, wrap your head around that. That's what happens when you have new categories that are popping up. And, like, you know, something like Vivi is just a few years old. So theoretically, if one of the people on that team would have been a teenager, they could have been the most experienced person in the room. And that's what we're seeing with Roblox and gaming and development. And by the way, I'll give you a stat. David, when he first got involved with Al, was the distributor of cards in New Zealand, and he was a teenager, and Al didn't even know it. This is a story that Al tells me all the time. We laugh about it. And because David he came across as so mature that no one knew that he was a kid. And that's how he really got his start, by working with Al years and years ago and in distributing Pokemon.
That's wild. Yeah, I think he was like 17 or 18.
I love that story.
That's amazing.
Fact,
like, what a hustler.
Dude, in fact, being 17, and you know, it's funny because Al tells me he never even asked. Al didn't even think to ask. And again, you know what? That's sort of the mentality. But the truth is, if you're dealing with a 17-year-old, just legally, there's a whole bunch of laws about doing contractual work with someone who's 17 years old. Like, if you go to the store and you sell a kid who's 17 something, they could possibly bring it back after it's half eaten and say, you weren't supposed to sell that to me in the first place. So it's a whole different thing when you're doing a global deal or a regional deal for an amazing license like that. But yeah, David's always been ahead of his time.
So you had, in that response, you had a lot about how collectibles mean to you. What was maybe not necessarily the most nostalgic, but what is the collectible that means most to you, and why?
So the collectible that means the most to me it's not one that has any specific real value. It's just what it meant to me as a collector. And I come from a very middle class family. I grew up in Mississippi and Tennessee, and in fact, the city that I lived in Mississippi was Columbus, Mississippi. It was right in the middle of the state, and the median income today, I think, is like $22,000 or something like that. So it gives you kind of an idea. Like, look, I mean, it was salt of the earth type situation. And my brother, 13 years older than me, took me to a local flea market when I was 3 years old, and he was 16, and he was just driving, and we went into the flea market, and he bought me a penny that at the time was, I think, from 1876 or 1879, and it was 1976. So 3 years later, it was going to be 100 years old. And I think he paid $1 for it. And we talked about it. And I remember at the time him telling me, Jeremy, when you're 6, this is going to be 100 years old. And I still have it. I have the penny. I have it. I look at it occasionally. It's almost like collectibles are almost like music. You can listen to a piece of music and it reminds you of a moment that you feel emotionally connected to. And collectibles have much the same thing. You could be going through a certain thing in your life. You can look at something and it can remind you of that. And for me, collectibles kind of have that same thing. So, and frankly speaking, I recently had a conversation with Gary Vee where something similar came up when we talked about the penny. And my brother heard it, and he sent me a text of a penny from 1876 or 79. And honestly, it just, it chokes me up, man, because I know that, there's a big responsibility in terms of being part of any collectible community, because it means a lot, and you don't know what people are going through, and you don't know what it means to them. But just make the assumption that any community that you're part of the family, and you're part of the fabric, and that you have a responsibility to all of them. And you don't know if they're 3 or they're 30 or they're 50, but that's the one that meant the most to me in terms of a collectible item.
And
That's
sorry
awesome
to cut you guys. I just had one quick follow-up, and I'll let the rest of you guys go. When you mentioned in there that, you come from very humble beginnings, and obviously there's a little bit of learning curve to having some money the first time you get some, but there is.
Yeah.
But when was it in your life that you finally realized that, not that money didn't matter, but it's like, oh, hey, it's a nice $10,000 gain. Like for us, we have parties every single night. Like our collectibles just went up like 30%. We made $10,000. I love this game. How long before you stopped getting like really excited about that? And it was just like, okay, back to work.
Well, I'll tell you this. I have a deep level of respect for money, and I have a deep level of respect for $100, $1,000, $1 million. Same respect for that money, because I know that it means different things to different people. So now my particular relationship with money has changed over time, but my respect for money hasn't changed at all, because I understand what it means, and I understand that there's a kid in Columbus, Mississippi right now that is aspiring to do something with their life, and they'll be in LA 50 years from now. I'm 48, so 45 years from now, and I'll be long gone, but we're all part of the same chain. We're passing the torch. That's all we're doing, is passing it back and forth. So specifically to answer your question, my relationship with money changed when I went from being an executive to an entrepreneur again, because I was an entrepreneur when I was young, but I was an executive, and I was, at the president level of large companies, large organizations, and gave it all up to try to create something from nothing, which, at the end of the day, you have your biggest payoff, your biggest return on investment when you bet on yourself, stuff that you can't even imagine until you take that plunge. But the problem is the upside comes with a huge cost. And I used to have a spreadsheet that I would look at every single day, and I would watch my money increase, and I would make projections. Well, here's where I'm going to be next year, and here's where I'm going to be in 2 years. And then when we started the business in 2012, I was in a free fall. We had to invest in the company and in inventory and in people and in structure. And it took years and years to become profitable. And in the meantime, when you're in a category like toys or collectibles, there's a limited number of dollars that entire category does every year. And in the toy space, it's around $80 billion globally. But it's only growing at a couple percentage points a year. And you've got big companies that want to protect their space. So you have lawsuits and you have all this other crap that comes with the desire to have wealth. And so what happened for me is I really went from being a position where I was set for the rest of my life as an executive and could have gone down that path, to risking absolutely everything, so that I could have, this insurmountable kind of wealth that I thought maybe at the end of the rainbow. But before I could get there, I had to touch zero or close to it. And that's when my relationship with money changed, because it was no longer a linear thing. Now it was variable. Now it meant like I'm 44, then I'm 45, then I'm 46. And each one of those years, I used to be able to 100% check the box. And now there was no box. There was nothing other than the risk. But it was good. It was healthy, because it freed me. I was no longer in a cage. Now I was free. I was free to be broke. I was free to be rich, but it was all going to be on me. And when we sold the company, it changed, certainly had a big impact. And obviously being an officer in a big company has an impact, and holding equity in a big company has impact. But I am way less focused on the money now, and way, way focused on the passion. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but I'm hopeful that someone derives value from this answer, because I'm just letting you know there's no right or wrong. If you want to be free from every dollar worry of your life, you're going to have to take big risks in life. If you want to have a certain life where you dig in and work your ass off and have a good outcome, at the end of the day, you may end up in the same place. It's the ride along the way that you might feel a little bit more freedom one way or the other.
Thank you.
I actually had a question. It kind of goes back to what you were talking about before about how you're looking more so towards the the different industries that can impact the toy industry with as far as NFT projects and things like that. I was actually curious because I know you're no stranger to this community.
Yeah.
How do you see Vivi actually impacting your industry? Like what type of impact will Vivi have on what you do specifically?
I mean, it's a great question. Um, I think, like I was saying before, and I really believe this, that it's incremental. I think that, and I can break it down by the categories of my industry. Um, there's a big piece of our business that's preschool. They're little kids, and these little kids love the tactile experience that they have with Coco Melon or Blippy or some of the other preschool properties that we have. And digital collectibles isn't going to really change that world very much. Um, and if maybe very little or none. Um, then you have then you have like action figures and fashion dolls, and fashion will be affected a little bit, maybe none. It's hard to know, positive, negative. It's really when you get into things like action figures and you get into the very specific traditional high level of adult consumerism. And here's my expectation. My expectation is digital collectibles will introduce a whole new group of people to the concept of collecting and investing in collecting. And the primary market, the people who go out and buy a Batman figure or AEW figure or Halo figure, and they're not really inspired by the concept of making money on the secondary market, it will not be affected at all by the fact that there's digital assets out there because they can still show off their product at work and at home. The subset of people that are looking to collect for secondary market value, vintage stuff or valuable stuff or limited edition stuff, I actually think can be benefited by having digital collectibles because, I mean, look, one of my colleagues is Todd McFarlane, right? And you see the McFarlane Vivi item, the Batman. And what do I see? I see people dying to collect the physical item now, whereas before it may not be on the radar. So my expectation is, while there may be a little bit of cannibalization, that on the whole, it would only affect a very small subset of the toy industry. And that will be offset by a whole bunch of new consumers that are coming in. And so the net effect, I believe, will be an increased demand in the toy space on the collectible side. So I get to have the best of both worlds. I get to enjoy the success of other people, not wish anything bad on them, and be a consumer and a fan, and still continue to be someone who's helping develop collectible systems on the physical side. To me, it's a triple win. I'm so happy for people, and it makes me really, really happy to be a part of a collector community as well.
That was an amazing answer. Definitely thank you for that. I also had one follow-up that I wanted to get your thoughts on. I forgot who said it. I forgot if it was a tweet or article or something, but it was something along the lines of the something like Vivi could help maybe. I got the impression that something like Vivi could help test toys and have like a test group before you actually make the toys in like your world or something like that. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it depends. Okay. If you're talking about, so toys are interesting, right? Because there's the type of toys that you collect for value. Like some of the stuff that I have behind me is stuff that you show off your collectible savviness. And, I got in on that one. And by the way, I've only manufactured a fraction of the stuff behind me. I just celebrate other people's stuff all the time. I just love it. I love other people winning. It makes me so happy. As I got older, I really connected with whatever that rhythm is in the universe that hopes for other people to do well, man. I'm so deep in that. But, to answer your question specifically, I would have to remember what the hell it was, and you're gonna have to remind me one more time because I went off the deep end just then. So tell me one more time so I can remember.
It was could Vivi be used as like a testing ground?
Okay, got it. All right, that's what ADHD does to a human. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because you've got the type of toys that you collect for value, secondary market value. Then you've got the type of toys that are really meant for people who are looking for that tactile experience, right? And so when you're talking about a 5-year-old who wants that play set and wants to experience the car blasting through the hoop or the loop, and then going through a jump and jumping through the dinosaur's mouth, and there's nothing like that tactile experience. I've been through so many toy tests over the years, and specifically where they're trying to test the new content. Like I remember way back in the day, like 20 years ago, when we were bringing He-Man back at Mattel, because I was a Mattel brand manager when we brought that back and brought back the show. And we sat in a room and there was dial testing. Okay, when dial testing means you're sitting with a bunch of kids and adults. They're watching a show, and it's like, you ever see like a presidential like debate, and people are dialing it up to 10 or down to 1, depending on how they feel like a candidate reacted. Well, they're asking kids and adults to do this in terms of how much they like content or how much they like what they're seeing. It's almost impossible to gauge a digital experience on how much you might enjoy a physical one where there's a feature to it. It's different when you're doing something that's collectible and the digital experience sort of matches what the benefit is of that item. So meaning, like, if I'm collecting Pokemon figures to display on my shelf, I can get a really good sense of what that is digitally. But if there's a feature-based set where it's an RC vehicle that I can control to jump through hoops and whatever else, it's hard to reconnect that. So there is some benefit and value, but I think that value and benefit is more derived by someone who's a collector, an adult consumer, versus a younger kid who is the traditional toy buying audience.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely. Thank you for that
You're
response. I don't want to take up all the questions here, but there was a question that we just got here in the chat that I wanted to ask you. The thing to Donnie asked, how can Vivi ensure they're not a financial barrier to our kids collecting what they love and making sort of memories we cherish as collectors?
So meaning that it costs money to be part of the collectible system. What do you take from that question? What do you think it means?
Can I add on to that too?
Yeah.
Because with toys, there's such a emphasis on not just kids, but like a big emphasis on kids, right? So the fact that Vivi is having LOL surprise dolls and like going to be making things that are going to appeal to kids, I guess the caveat to that as well is, how do you move into the digital collectible space targeting kids as well, when I guess there's an entire more focused adult demographic tied to it, right? Like, how do you balance that?
Here's the truth. The truth is that this type of collectible system tends to heavily be an adult collector focused type marketplace. There will be gravitation younger. There will be launches of younger brands, but the primary objective is to target an older age consumer. I do think that as technology becomes more engaged over time, that things tend to go younger, and kids want to emulate their older siblings or their parents. And I can tell you, trading cards and baseball cards and sports cards and vintage, all that memorabilia is very viable to a younger age consumer. I do believe that there will be various price points and there will be various supplies that will allow for someone who has not necessarily the kind of money that you would require you to participate in some of the higher end, more expensive items. But that's the truth in any area of business. And as long as there are not enormous gas fees associated with the transfer, who's to say that they couldn't launch, or anybody in the digital space couldn't launch $5 experiences, $3 experiences, $1 experiences that are kind of like that impulse purchase. And, you know, one amazing way to do that is that blind box strategy where, you know, you launch 1 million items and they're $1 each, but there's also 10 items that are worth $25,000 each in there because they're so rare and limited. Well, the bottom line is I do think that this is primary adult collector, secondary younger. And I think that shared experience is going to be just that for a while, where it's the parent or it's the older sibling influencing the younger to be part of it and to be involved in it. And I pricing and all that other stuff will take care of itself over time to be more inclusive. But no, I don't think that you're going to have a lot of 12-year-olds competing for a Rizzo Batman or something like that. That's not the way it generally goes down.
That'd be a lot of allowance money for a Rizzo.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's awesome. And it's cool to hear, like, you know, your story around the coin and like just how you built up your entire business. Like it started with passion and then just kind of grew from there. I'm always curious, you know, like because you, David, like all of you have this, you know, decades and decades of collecting experience and like now are sitting on these, you know, empires of a business. I'm curious, what is the next big thing, or where's the gap currently with the way the NFT market is spaced with Vivi or with other ways, right? Like we've already seen digital collectibles. We saw comics now are making a trend, not just in Vivi, but others. Now we have stamps. Like, I guess, what do you think is going to be the next thing? Do you think, I want to say like collecting digital coins, NFTs, or antiques, or like, I guess, like what is that next move that you think is kind of being slept on in the space?
Well, I think that, you know, first of all, I'm a huge proponent of physical collectibles. Okay. And so I think that it's an interesting time because we're coming off of this massive positive momentum in physical. I'm talking about vintage and high end and stuff like that. And the last year with the introduction of digital, physical is held pretty strong. And I think it's going to be interesting because I think that, like, if you look at 4 or 5 months ago, for every NFT project that existed, like Bored Ape Yacht Club or World of Women or, you know, any of these like OG projects that weren't CryptoPunks, weren't at the very beginning, but that were in that sort of second wave. For every project that existed then, there's 25 projects today. And for every project today, 6 months from now, there'll be 25 projects. So the proliferation of these collectible systems and projects is not sustainable, but it's just not. At some point in time, those types of systems, there will be massive multi-billion dollar franchises that are born out of this. But most of it will not have a great return on investment. The thing that's interesting about Vivi is that they essentially do in digital what I do in physical, which is they focus on critical, key, meaningful brands. And when you focus on critical, key, meaningful brands, other people can't replicate it because they can come out with whatever they want. Lazy Cat Monkey Club, doesn't matter. Whatever. That doesn't affect Batman. As long as Warner Brothers manages Batman tight, as long as Disney is managing Marvel tight, Lucas, as long as Tokidoki is focused on making sure that they limit their partners, you can sustain that for eternity if you've got a good collectible platform, because that's what happens in the physical space. So what I would say to you is what I suspect, at least on digital, is that the real meaningful licensed properties and the companies that are trusted to deliver those, with Vivi being a clear leader in that category, will sustain, and some things will fall off and some things will gain momentum, but it'll be a nice mix of things. And the grander NFT universe of project after project after project after project will have some massive winners and mostly some very significant challenges. And that is going to be based almost primarily on the underlying community that they develop under any one of these programs. The one thing that you can say about Vivi is that the community is massive, super engaged. And so you've got community and you've got the brands. And as long as the licensors of these brands do a good job at managing them, I just see positive things in terms of longevity, only because I've lived it. I remember being in my 20s and working at Mattel and thinking like, how long can all of this even sustain itself? How long are people going to be interested in Hot Wheels? How long are people really going to be interested in He-Man? Well, here we are 20 years later. I've lived half a career, and I realize it can be perpetuated in perpetuity but it depends on who's managing the brand. And that's my very long answer. I will add one thing because I am long-winded, and that is that Vivi will change over time. I've said this before, because right now it's like if you went to Walmart and you grabbed absolutely everything off the shelf, that's sort of the Vivi experience. Anything they drop, you want. Anything. Let's go. Boom, boom, boom. But what happens when they hit a mature phase and there's 25 million people on the app and they're dropping 10 different things a day? You tend to focus. So now you go to Walmart and you go, well, you know what I like? I like action figures, or I like, apparel. I like fashion. I like whatever. You're not going down the aisle and ripping everything in the basket on every aisle. There's too much to buy. And that's the way I think you'll see with Vivi and stuff like that. They'll have a lot more users, and people really focus on the areas that they find very desirable. And the OG stuff will always be the OG stuff.
That was great. Thank you for that. Did you talked before about about Ecomi and Vivi and in that answer as well. So I do have a two-part question. One is a little easier to answer, it's kind of a quick math, and the other is a little bit more long-winded.
All right, let's go. Let's do it.
How much of your net worth did you put into Ecomi, and was the bet or investment a representation of your faith in the company, or did you cap yourself because it was too irresponsible to put that much money into the company, whether it be Omi, right? or the NFTs?
Okay, I'm going to answer because we're family. Okay, it's the only reason, and I think it's important that people hear. So here's the thing. I've done very well in my life at this point. All right. As I told you, it's been a long road, and I didn't start off with a bunch of cash, and I didn't have a specific straight line to being a wealthy person. But what I do today is I never over-index on anything because I don't need to. What point will I prove by trying to be Elon Musk #2? I have zero interest in that. Now, he was a very interesting individual. He made billions of dollars on PayPal, and he put it all on black. Boom. Ready to roll, man. He put it all on Tesla. He put it all on black. Let's go, right? And now he's the richest person in the world. That could have easily put it on red and not paid off at all. So I'm just not that guy. But I'll tell you what I did. I've invested in the last 18 months since investing in Ecomi and Omi and Vivi. I've invested in like 15 different startups. I generally put maybe $25,000, $50,000, $75,000. I'll deploy capital that way. I invested in an early round, Series A round in like Whatnot, in things like Zigazoo, which is a social media app for kids, Omi. I fully expect some of these investments will have 100 times returns. I really do. But as strong as I felt about anything when I put my money into it, I never want to not be able to put money into the next thing because I've deployed all my capital. So here's what I would say. I have been that all-in person. I put it all in on this business. I went from being a guy who certainly had a clear path to being someone who was walking through a bit of a dark cloud. But I don't need to. So I put a large sum of money into Vivi and into Omi before, in the very earliest days of, and it's had a tremendous return. And when I invested, it probably represented less than a 1/10 of 1% of my net worth. And today it might represent maybe 2%. And that's the truth.
Thank you so much for that. All right. Thank you so much for that.
Cat got your tongue, Randy?
No, I was just trying to unmute both at the same time.
You did it.
My brain wasn't working.
But that brings me to a bigger picture, okay? And the bigger picture is that if I were 20 years younger, I'm 48 years old. If I were 28 years old, the amount of money I put into it might have represented 30% of my net worth. Because you got to take big swings when you're younger, for sure. And it may have represented 85% of my net worth today. But what I'm saying is, when you have some hits in your life, you have to diversify as you get because it's very important to take a win and to take a portion of that win, pay taxes. Unfortunately, it's the way it is. Take a portion of that win and put it into the fruits of other people's potential labor, or put some into your own self, or put some into other collectibles. But the key in life is diversification. It'll get you through the worst moments. You'll never see a market plunge and pull out all your hair if you've got your toes in a lot of different waters.
Yeah, agreed. And I told my subscribers many times that this is the last time that I will go all in on any one company. But I was curious, before Cavell asked his next question, what was the point where you said, hey, I can do 35 or 85 or how much percent into this one company, and only doing 1/10 of 1% of your net worth? When did that change for you?
Well, it's a lot of money.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I mean, I want to be clear. Like, look, I don't want to brag, but it's the truth. And so I put a lot of money into it because I believed in it, but I'm not putting all of my money into anything. So it gives me the opportunity to do things like learn about other areas or categories. Like I know about so many different things now because when you put a little skin in the game, you feel compelled to learn about it. Like, behind the curtain. But when I was younger, I was more of a let it roll, let it, throw it on, because like I said, I had time and I had the knowledge that the impact was only so much. There's a pretty significant benefit to having a little bit of something, a little bit. Like, in my 30s and my 20s and even in my 40s, when I was running the business and we were kind of like running into walls. If you have $50,000 in expendable income and you put it all into something, sometimes that desperation drives amazing outcomes because you have no alternative but to win. So I see the value in it. But I just want to encourage people that after they have a win, to diversify. If you're taking $500 and you're throwing it on something, and assuming you have the ability to put food on the table and take care of your basic needs and your family or whatever it is that you're responsible for, that's one thing. But you got a big win, you can certainly look. My hair is fantastic. I'm 48 years old. It's incredible. I haven't lost a thing. I haven't lost one hair. And that is due to diversification.
Thank you for that.
All right. I'm not going to hold it against you rubbing in the hair thing, but
wait, I'm 5'7". I let me just add that to the equation so you're fully aware.
I actually, kind of on the topic of the Omi token and your investments, you tweeted out something interesting a while ago, like a month or so ago. People have been speculating that the circulating supply would take 20 plus years or entire lifetime, like to get rid of the circulating supply of Omi tokens. But you actually tweeted out something that said we could see the circulating supply burned in like 6 years. So what was your thought process when it comes down to seeing burns happen at that rate?
Right. Well, it comes down to this. Okay. It comes down to me never wanting to point to a token and saying, wow, that's going to blow up. That's going to the moon. That's whatever. That's not me. I don't want to convince somebody that something's going to happen by pointing to the thing and saying, watch what that does. I like to paint a logical picture and then let people decide what it is what they want to do. And so here's my logical picture. I'll just throw it out there. Okay. And please correct me if I don't get this exactly right, but the non-circulating supplies, I'll just make it a round number, something like 250 billion tokens. Is that right? Round about 240, 230. So for this conversation, let's say it's 250. Okay. And the daily burn on an average day today is around 80 million on the secondary market. I'm sorry. Yeah, 80 million on the secondary market and around, between another 50 and 200 million on the primary market, depending on the sizable drop, depending on the impactor and the size of that drop. So today they have about 1.5 million active users. They went from 0 to 1.5 million in a year. And last I heard they were growing at like 30,000 users a day. So if you grow at 30,000 users a day for 365 days, that's 10 million new users. Easy. Okay. That's assuming no pace, no user growth, pace growth. That's saying that every single day it's the same. So just using logic, I said, well, if it goes from 1.5, and let's just say it goes from 1.5 to 7.5, it sees a 5x growth, okay, over a year. But you can't take the total 5x. You have to take the average because that's what the average will be over the course of the 365 days. So instead of it being 7.5 million, the median between 1.5 and 7.5 is, what is that? 4.5. Yeah, 4.5. So that means over the course of the year, on any day, you put them all out there. If you go from 1.5 in the beginning to 7.5 in the end, the average day you'll have 4.5 million users over the course of the year, which is a 3x growth on what the secondary market would bring. So if the average today is 80, then the average over the course of the next 12 months is 240 on a secondary market. Now, by the way, this is all theoretical. It doesn't mean it's absolutely happening. It doesn't mean that the people that come in next will not be as active on the secondary market. This is just math to prove a point, okay? But let's just say, forget 240. Let's say it's 200 million a day. 200 million a day on the secondary market average over the next 365 days is 70 billion Omi. And then you have your primary market drops. If the token doesn't move and you use just basic logic in terms of growth, you could have 70 billion Omi burned on the secondary market. And let's just say there's 100 drops and the average drop is 100 million. That's another 10 million. Let's just say you're looking at, on the low end, if the token doesn't move, 50 billion Omi. On the high end, if the token doesn't move, 100 billion Omi. Okay? Using a range, using logic. And you have a 250 million Omi. So it burns the entire reserve in 2.5 to 5 years. And that is math that's based on if I were working in a financial institution, if I was working as a consultant, or if I'm projecting my future as a business owner, that's math that I would use, and I would feel comfortable using math communicating with other people. I'm not saying it's going to happen. All this is a scenario, but it's not a scenario based on stuff that I'm pulling out of the air. It's a scenario based on things that seem very realistic. So if the token doesn't move, then you burn the entire reserve in 2.5 to 5 years. But if the token moves, that changes. In the meantime, they're launching other things that will also move the secondary token market, the non-circulating supply and the circulating supply. Just, the conclusion that I draw is one that I don't point to directly, okay? But it's the reason why I am a heavy investor in Omi, personally. I'm not trying to change what you do. I'm not trying to tell people go to the moon or anything like that. And if it were to go up significantly, I'll take a couple wins and I'll stay in. I'll probably keep 70% of it. I don't know. We'll see. But anyways, that's my rationale, and that's the scenario that I build. And I think that it will potentially have a very significant impact on token, but I would rather point to logic than point to the moon.
Thank you. I definitely like that response. Also, there was another one. Someone asked, what utility for Vivi collectibles and comics do you want to see come, or do you expect to come?
What utility? Well, it's interesting because the concept of a piece of code that exists on the blockchain evolving is interesting. It's possible, okay? But what's also possible and even probable is that when you own a piece of code, you belong to a particular club, okay? So there's the McFarlane Club, there's a club for every one of these things, right? And when you have that, there's utility that can be involved, especially when you're on the blockchain and it's visible to other people, where airdrops are possible, where they could airdrop you something that has way more utility or is part of a game that's being launched because you own it, you get it. And there's utility associated with it. As the Viviverse, as partners come about, the fact that you can immediately be identified on the blockchain means that they can both potentially evolve whatever it is that you own, but also associate it with other rewards associated with that thing. And that's the way a lot of programs are working. And like, if you look at Bored Ape Yacht Club, it's been very interesting because they did the mutant apes and they airdropped mutant apes to everybody that owned an ape. Huge win, huge benefit to people. All of a sudden, they've got another thing. Utility is going to change dramatically over the years in terms of what could be airdropped to you or what could be derived from whatever the code that you have on your little digital ledger, okay? The utility changes with the technology. So imagine, I'm 48. I was born in 1973. I don't remember when Pong was introduced, but I think it was around the time that I was born. The basic game where you have two paddles and a ball or a puck, and it's ponging back and forth. And then and then you get to the latter 70s, early 80s, you've got these games where you're playing Pac-Man or Space Invaders. And 30 years later, you've got advanced consoles. 10 years after that, you're sitting in your room with this amazing Oculus. You've got various instruments that allow you to be very immersed. And that happened over one half of a lifespan. And technology is evolving at a pace way more rapid now than it was evolving between 1973 and 1990, and 1990 to 2000. Technology is rapidly evolving. So my expectation is there's a half-life to all of this, and that the advancements that you saw in the content delivery systems, digital content delivery systems in 48 years, you'll see that kind of growth maybe in the next 12. You'll see that kind of massive explosion happen in a quarter of the time. And then you'll see that kind of progress occur again, maybe in the next 6 years after that. So it's hard to imagine, but what I do imagine is, I imagine that, right now we live in a world where we're utilizing just a few senses, sight, sound. But as things evolve, it'll be a 5 senses universe that you're able to experience, which is pretty interesting. And like, even for me, like, I'm trying to be healthy, and my objective, if I can, is, unless God forbid something happens to me, I'm going to try to make it into my 90s. And that means that I could be a 90-year-old man that's having experiences of a young man, because I can live my normal life, and who knows what I'll be dealing with at that time, 42 years from now. But then I can plug in and live the life that I lived and remember. And who knows how Vivi will be part of that. But these are the things that we are all going to have the opportunity to experience, and it will not only be experienced by billionaires. These things will be experienced by normal people, and that's the best part, because we live in a world where the wealthy disproportionately have had the influence and the access to information and the access to experiences. But that's gone. That's changing drastically. The entry price points and the experiences. And look, you used to have to spend $50,000 a year to go to a college to get information. Now you've got 19-year-olds who hold more information in their head than the professors at those $50,000 a year colleges. It's great. It means that you can accomplish way more now coming from Columbus, Mississippi, or wherever else you live in the world. And that's the way it should be. Cream rises to the top. Shouldn't have anything to do with anything else. Only one thing: your desire and your ability to operate.
Well said.
Amazing answer. Amazing.
Yeah. Oh man. So I mean, my head's spinning, Jeremy. Just give me a second. So I mean, you were in Omi and Vivi very, very early. And I just think, I guess, what has been your expectation now, seeing how fast it's grown in a year? And then where do you really see it going over the next year or two? Because obviously it's surpassed even Vivi's expectations, right? Like, they're like, well, we were supposed to be at this high, and then now we're this high. But a lot of the worry is, at least the FUD, is that what happens if the growth continues, and then Disney or Apple or someone else, targets them, and then they want to acquire them, right? And like, a lot of us said, well, they didn't get into this to sell out. Like, it's a passion project that's growing. But I guess, what are your thoughts? I know it was a long-winded question, but
no, it's a great question. It's a great question, Taps. It's a tremendous question. Acquisition is always a possibility for any organization or company. But the bigger something gets, the more resources it takes to acquire them. The more resources it takes to acquire, the better your plan ought to be when you make that acquisition. The more your board pays attention to the decisions that you make. Like, as an organization, if Jazzwares goes out and acquires a company that, has very little profits and very small, the approval process is not what it is if you're looking to make a big acquisition. It's just the truth with anything. Okay. You better have a real serious plan. And right at this point in time, Vivi is so meaningfully big, and they're growing at such a rapid pace, Ecomi, Vivi, that if there ever were an acquirer, they would definitely need to have a plan before they pulled that trigger, because it's too much to risk casually. Now, a year ago, you could, if you're a Disney, Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers, Universal, DreamWorks type, and you want to buy up a company at a penny on the current dollar, you wouldn't have to. I mean, you could just discard it if you didn't like it. It's like a toy. It's like a little toy, but they're way beyond that. That's part one. Part two, I just don't anticipate it. There's so much growth, and this category is so interesting. What I think is, more likely is that you grow with other people that you introduce into the project, and that the original vision is protected. But who knows? I mean, the thing that I find comforting about the growth is that it would be a very, very meaningful acquisition. I don't think someone's going to come in and screw that up. It's too risky. It's your job. Even if you're the CEO of a $500 billion company and you make a big acquisition, you got a lot on the line. You're going to make a lot of money if you just kind of like hang around in that role. You don't need to make a big stupid acquisition and mess that up. So I don't know. I don't expect it.
First, Jeremy, I want to hug you. Your answers are so great. But I saw
virtual hug. See, we live in the world digital. We can do a virtual hug right now. Let's go.
Totally. I saw maybe like a month or so ago, maybe around the new year, on Twitter, you posted a like small video clip of you and your wife like popping champagne, I believe. And the question is, for I guess some people that can do some math real quick and they can kind of figure out, okay, you said before what generally you would invest between 25 and 75 in between new projects and what net worth is. What do you do when in, let's say, a couple months, this can 10 or 40x, the Omi investment? And we have Omi to NFT or Omi to land. Do you talk to your wife and say, hey, I think we should, double down and take this Omi and buy land? Or does the conversation go in a different way and you guys say, hey, actually, our daughters are growing up and we don't have too much time with them before they start on their own lives. Maybe it's time to settle down for a bit and then, start anew again when they're off of college? Or do you just say like, that's not us. We don't sit down. We always have to continuously build.
That is really interesting. So in the scenario in which it went from X to 40X, I would probably sell 25%, and rebalance my portfolio a little bit, because 40X would be a very big number for me. And I don't know, maybe it would be a third, maybe it would be 40%. But I'll tell you a story of investing and with companies that are moving and changing and evolving significantly. So in 2000, and I forget which month, it may have been June, I invested $20,000 into Apple. Apple had gone from $60 a share to 30, and I invested 20 grand, and it sucked. It went from 20 to 12 over the course of 4 months, and I sold, and I got out with an $8,000 loss. And that $12,000 today would be worth $8.5 million. Okay. Now, $8.5 million is a lot of money. To anybody that has money, $8.5 million is a lot of money. And $12,000 was a meaningful amount of money to me at that time too. So the way I'm answering your question is as follows. Okay. Today, with what I currently enjoy in my life, if I had $20,000 in Apple and I believed in it, it went down to 12, I'd probably hold it for 20 years and not think about it. But if I had $8.5 million in anything, I might carve it down to 4 and redistribute the rest. But the level that you're talking about would be pretty dramatic. Now, it is interesting when you're looking about market cap. The market cap of the circulating supply is less than $2 billion. It's like 1.7 or 1.6 or 1.5 or 1.4. I forget which one it is. I think it said 1.3. But so if you do multiply that by 40, you're talking about a $52 billion market cap of the circulating supply. And, that's a big number that puts you in kind of rare air. You're maybe in the top 5 to 10 cryptocurrencies. But then you'd be the only one really associated with Disney, and you're the only one that's associated with some of these other things. So where would it end up? Where should it end up? I'm not one to say, but I'm one to hold a pretty big bag, and I believe in it, and I'm not going anywhere with that bag. So if it did have that kind of return, though, I would rebalance my portfolio just because that's my nature at this point in my life.
And work would not stop for you. You would continue.
No.
Okay.
Never. No, you know what? Here's the thing. I am not working with the primary objective of money. Okay. My working right now and my being in the toy space and the collectible space and the physical space, the incremental money that I make on an individual year doesn't change my day. Okay. But what it does do is it allows me to be part of the conversation. It is so fulfilling communicating with collectors and consumers of various brands. It's what I always dreamed of. And it was as or more important to me than having wealth. Being relevant, apparently, to me, was a huge thing. I didn't even know it until I had the other. And then I realized, oh my God, I love this stuff. And I love the idea that I could influence other people to potentially follow the things that they love. And I do have a certain level of fear that if I walked away from my core business, that I would no longer have the kind of relevance that I currently have. And if I lack that relevance, then I lack the influence. And what about the next kid in Columbus, Mississippi that I might be able to reach out to and affect? I don't want that kid to not have an opportunity to have that moment. So anyways, listen, it's very, it's very much about connectedness. So no, man, if the Publishers Clearinghouse showed up in my house because they have a new $1 billion prize, I would still go to work tomorrow.
I really like that answer.
Yeah, that was a great answer. I also have I think is probably the most important question that we've had here today from the legend himself, Hello K. He'd like to know, what is your favorite Pokemon, and also when.
Hello K, look at that handsome young gentleman. All right, so my favorite Pokemon changes. Sometimes it's Magikarp, and I'll go with Magikarp right now because Magikarp is a big fish that does very little except flap around, and then you misinterpret what it's all about, and it evolves on you, and then the outcome isn't so great if you misinterpret or you may have taken a look at it and just assessed it for what it looked like or what it did, and then wow, what the hell? And that the truth about life is, if you sum somebody up by the way they look, you're missing out on a lot. You're missing out on a lot because you don't know what's going on inside their head, or what their potential is. And when Pokemon, I mean, here's the thing. Pokemon, and I have a 15-year relationship with Pokemon that goes all the way back to 2005, when we originally took the brand from Hasbro, when I was an executive in a toy company, not a company partner. And I'm amazed at what's happened with that brand. It's so well run. It's so well managed. A lot of companies have a 6-month vision, a 1-year vision. Pokemon has a decades vision. And it's one of the reasons why they're the largest franchise of all time. And it's one of the reasons why they will continue to be. And it's one of the reasons why they have long-term partners like me. And, at some point in time when I hang it up, I think they'll probably still be my partner at that time too. So they don't make very, very quick decisions or thoughts. And I am a good boy, and I know when to share and when not to share. But I'll just leave it at this. They are the most amazing brand I've ever known. They are incredibly thoughtful and smart people. Even though they're the biggest brand of all time, you would never know it by interacting with them. Like, they're really, honestly, you'd think you're dealing with a small company, but they're very smart. And they're very, very relatable in that regard to me. And like I said, never judge a book by its cover, because what's going on inside that head, that collective head, is the greatest property in the world. Digitally, obviously, they've shown their cards a little bit because they've run the most successful app in its kind ever with Pokemon Go. In fact, their investment in Pokemon Go in Niantic, they invested in our company literally 6 months later or 3 months later. It was a miracle, honestly. So I know I'm not answering the question directly, but you have to believe that at some point in time, this all touch points brand is going to have even more touch points. But it is certainly not for me to reveal what their strategies are.
Okay. That was a great answer. Thank you so much. So,
it was super non-committal, but I mean, listen, the thing about life is that almost all things come from good logic. If you use poor logic when you're starting a business, the outcome is usually not good. If you use good logic, the outcome is usually good. But everything can be approached in a logical manner by the cues and the clues that you see. And there's a lot of clues and cues that you can take that are readily available for you to assess, which brands may or may not ever be in a space.
Yeah. I actually love how even your favorite Pokemon actually is deep, and it's like a whole metaphor for something else. That's amazing. We have one more here. Your end of year prediction, I guess maybe Omi, the Omi token, or collectibles, whichever way you want to go with it.
All right, I'll take it this way and say I don't make price predictions, but I do point to other logical factors. And the logical factor that I always point to is the burn. And the logical factor I always point to. So rather than say something's going to happen, I say, what if it doesn't happen? What are the logical outcomes of it not happening? Well, the logical outcomes of it not going up is a complete forest fire of the non-circulating supply and a crossover to the circulating supply. That certainly seems to be the most likely outcome based on everything that's happening. So there's just a lot happening that leads me to believe that I should hold on tight, but that's just me. And I gave you my logic on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So with that kind of mentality, it's almost like with the tokenomics, it's almost built out to be just as long as Vivi succeeds, then no matter what, Omi's going to go up in value, whether it's right now or it just takes longer to burn, right? Like it's almost like the ultimate hodl tokenomics because, like you just said, it's a forest fire of Omi burning if nothing happens, and then eventually we'll be at a lower circulating supply or just a lower supply overall, or things start to happen and less burns, but there's also more being bought up.
Yes. And the other thing is, listen, the bigger a company gets, the more powerful it gets, and the more people want to be associated with it, and the more they want to be partners with it. And, you know, when David says that he wants to find other utility even outside of the traditional Ecomi and Vivi universe, I actually believe him. Like I know him as a person, as a business person, and I do believe that that is a true objective of his. And again, without sharing anything that I wouldn't or shouldn't share, I just, you know, I take that person at their word. In addition, look at all that we do know, and draw your logical conclusions from that. This is a very, very unusual pattern that this company has been on. Like, it's very rare to go from 0 to 1.5 million. It's very rare on a user basis in a year. It's very rare to do that in a category that's a new category. Like, this is some intense stuff that's going on right now. So, you know, these predictions that are like back of the envelope about growth and everything else, you might rip those up and throw them away when you see what actually happens. And who knows, maybe it'll be significantly better than anything that we could project by using logic, because nothing about the growth from the first year is logical. That's what I'm trying to explain. Like, I'm using logic to describe something that's happening in a phenomenal situation to make a point. But, you know, some people could throw logic fully aside and say nothing that's happened is logical. Therefore, the next thing is also going to be illogical in terms of the growth phase. But I don't like doing that because I don't want anybody to make a bet based on my, you know, moon boy behavior. I'm not that guy.
I love it. And switch around my audio and visual. Let me know if you guys are still hearing an echo. So apologies there. I'm just curious because I'm not sure if anyone's ever asked before, how many Vivi collectibles do you have? And I guess to date, what is your favorite collectible on Vivi? And then let me add one more, just while I have you. And then what do you want to see on Vivi?
So, you know, I have, I believe around 100 different collectibles. I don't have like thousands or hundreds and hundreds, but I have a lot of the OG stuff. Like, you know, my favorite I showed the other day, which was the McFarlane, but the actual number 100, the actual 100. And I, you know, assessing value or assessing, like, that's one to me that is kind of historical and relevance. And so it's my favorite in that regard. But I think that I just really, and I think my favorite on a non, you know, historical relevance basis, just being a collector, is just the first Marvel comic. I have a few of those. And I really loved what it stood for. And, you know, the fact that I was able to get one on the drop and then bought a few more. But I really dig it. And also, I think the first stamp that they dropped that I picked up, I really value that because stamp collecting has kind of been a second thought for a long time, but it's in fact one of the oldest forms of collecting. So the fact that we're collecting stamps made me really happy, because what a cool thing to collect, but people just don't necessarily think about it anymore. But, you know, I have failed on so many drops because of my internet connection is maybe sucky, but my OG stuff is pretty awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
So my next question has a small lead up, but I promise it has a point. In Marvel Comics, Reed Richards decides that to create a future foundation because he knows that there are some kids that just think differently than adults and they have creative ways that adults just can't do currently. Before you mentioned that you want to keep working because of the possibility that there's some kid in Tennessee or Mississippi or wherever that could, well, you didn't say become the next you, but could become the next you. My question is, at the end of the day, or before you're ready to leave, will you create a Uncle Jeremy Foundation where you can go and try to take on people and teach them what you know?
I mean, that's part of what this is, right? I mean, for me, I was really early on the internet stuff, and that's a whole different story. But on social media, I was just on Facebook up until 2 years ago. And then 2 years ago, I got on social media, and somehow there's a couple 100,000 followers in that time, which is really cool because honestly, I'm not like dancing to the latest TikTok song. I don't particularly, on my best day, I wake up and I'm a 6.5 at my age range. I'm a 2 when it comes to a young person, but I'm a 6.5 on my age range. Okay. Nobody's joining me because of the way I look. Nobody's joining me. So it's all because maybe I'm saying something inspirational and that there's value because people find it credible. And I just want, that's what I want. So to answer your question, oh yeah, I definitely over the course of my life, I'm going to lean in further and further and further and further into other people because that is a legacy that you can undeniably carry forward beyond your lifetime. So for sure. Absolutely.
To quote Katniss Everdeen, I volunteer as tribute.
Yeah. Hey man, you're making your own legacy in real time. You are making your own legacy in real time. And I became acquainted with you on YouTube before very early when you had just very few followers, when you were talking about your own commitment to diving into this and really diving in with both feet. And it just reminds me of being an entrepreneur. It reminds me of believing in something so much and just really putting it out there. And I have a lot of admiration for that. I do think it's a strategy that you don't carry with you until you're 100, but I think it's a great strategy to carry forward, maybe at your age and your particular period of time. And I also know that do I remember correctly? Otherwise you are also an entrepreneur, or there was another business that you were associated with, and that
Yeah, I had two. I had a high risk lending business where I would go and I would give money to other business owners.
I remember,
which was really good. And then the other one was the Chavez Canto project, where I would buy and sell Pokemon cards.
Oh, cool!
And I had that PSA 10 Trophy Kangaskhan. That was my big one. That was a great one.
Well, you know what? So right now you had those two and this, but 20 years from now you'll be able to communicate 13 other things that you did, and those 13 other things may be fully funded by what you're doing right now. But that's a whole different time and place that that will exist, and I'll be very excited to talk to that guy too.
Thank you.
Okay, I actually have like a 3-in-1 question here.
All right, let's go.
So I have a question about what you feel the impact of land in the Viviverse is going to be. Will you be buying any? And if you are, what type of business would you like to build on top of this land, or would you be renting out your land to someone else? So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it reminds me of domain names, okay? And I've been involved with domain names since the inception. Like I started buying domain names in 1996, 1997. And I've told this story before, but when I was 23 years old, I bought act.com with student loans and sold it a year later for a 500 times return. So I fully understand the value of digital property, right? I mean, I went from being a student that paid for my college, paid for my undergrad. My parents were involved my first year, but my dad had started a business, and it was a rough go. Turned out okay, but it was a rough go. So I took some risk with student loans. It's kind of crazy, honestly, but I believed in domain names very much. So what is a domain name? Domain name is an invisible asset that is essentially a piece of real estate that you can build a website, which is kind of like the metaverse, the Viviverse. It's the Web 1 version of what we're talking about today. So the answer to your question is absolutely, because I was born and raised. How about not born and raised, but my very initial days of being an entrepreneur was based on digital assets that were invisible. So definitely, in fact, I can't wait. I'll be one of the first people in if I can be. But look, the cat's out of the bag. This isn't like, meeting Dan and Dave a few years ago, David and Dan, and sitting with Al and looking at the business plan and buying stuff early on and buying Omi in January, and like that. I can't recreate that with the Viviverse. There's going to be 3 million, 5 million, 7 million people are in on it with me. So I think the big arbitrage opportunity was at that time. But the bet is, will it go from, let's just say they introduce Viviverse and there's 3 million active users. Will it go from 3 million to 30 million actives? And under those circumstances, but I tend to answer your question. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what I'll build because I don't know what the toolkit is yet. But I do know that I will hold. And I do know that if given the opportunity and other people have a great idea, but they don't have the funds to buy their own space, but they have a great idea, I would be super happy to partner up with somebody who could then leverage that space appropriately.
Thanks. That was a perfect answer. We have one more about the Viviverse. Someone wants to know if you think the Viviverse is going to come this year, and what about a collab with Apple?
I don't know. I know that I know that if I were betting, I would say yes. But I think that the bigger you are, the more you need to get something right. And in addition to that, there's a lot of other players in the space. And one of the ways that Vivi did so well and became a market leader in the collectible side is that they were first. So you could kind of read between the lines. They have a lot of pressure to make sure that they are early. And they also have a lot of pressure to get it right. So, I mean, if I were to bet, I would say, yeah. Now, collaboration with Apple, that's a whole different thing. And I wouldn't be able to, if I knew that information, I wouldn't be able to share it. I think it's smart to collaborate with a giant organization. But remember, when you collaborate, you also then give up a little bit of your freedom. Collaboration, by its nature, is shared decision-making. It's not, if you're part of a team and you really are part of a team, it's funny. I heard Shaq say the other day, he said to Kobe, there's no I in team. And Kobe looked at Shaq and said, yeah, but there's an ME in team. I thought that was really funny. I don't know if it fits in this particular moment, but the point of the matter is that there's benefits and there's costs to big collaborations like that.
Okay. And I guess before I take up any more of the questions, we have one more. One more just came in. It said, "It's Jeremy's secret rare Spider-Man, his favorite collectible in the app."
My favorite collectible in the app is my Todd McFarlane. I think the Spider-Man is remarkable because it is the pace. It's like the front runner. It's like it's out in front. What is the drop? How many units of that is there? I forget. Is it 500, 1,000, 1,500? What's the number?
The secret rare Spider-Man?
With a secret
1,000,
rare.
Yeah.
Yes, 1,000.
1,000. Yeah. I mean, the McFarlane is 7,500. So, I think the Spider-Man is a very special asset. But yeah, no, you know what? My favorite item on Vivi is probably the secret rare Marvel one. I think that's probably my favorite, to be honest. Just because of the historical significance of the physical item. I think also the McFarlane is way up there for me.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that response. I mean, we can keep taking some questions here from the chat if no one else has anything. We have one here that asks, when will Vivi start the big marketing? Thanks.
So, marketing is an interesting thing because there's an old story about marketing, and that is that marketers who market to empty shelves are just as bad as people who never market at all. Essentially, they have all of the demand that they need right now, and they're ramping up their own development and their toolkit and their drops and everything else. Imagine if you market and you blow the thing up from 1.5 million to 10 million users, but the footprint is still being developed to satisfy that. I mean, we saw what happened this last year. They went from 0 to 1.5 million. Remember those early struggles that were based around just the demand and not having the systems for that demand. If 100 million people showed up tomorrow, it would be more problematic than it would be a positive thing. So I say don't market until you are fully prepared for those people, because I think this will be very highly reactive to marketing. Frankly speaking, I think people are coming without it.
That's great point. And actually, that goes really well into my question I had, which was, we're all investors, we're all Marine boys, we're all happy to be part of it. You guys hear that?
Yeah, it's kind of loud.
So my question is, that might have been mine, sorry, is I guess what are some of the potential struggles that you see, or I guess what some of the potential downfalls or things to look out for from Vivi and Ecomi as they continue to scale?
Well, I mean, some of the potential issues are, making sure that you ride that fine line between giving people a fair access to the drop that may be, disconnected to the speed of your internet provider. I think they have to come up with a better lottery system, so that everyone has an equal shot. Maybe they figure out better ways in terms of timing, like a certain percentage goes out instead of it being 8 a.m. at 8, at 8:02, at 8:05, at 8:04. I mean, like there's certainly things that they need to work on. They've admittedly communicated that has to do with the drop and the tactics, because it tends to favor a certain group. They have to figure out how to benefit their most ardent supporters without alienating others. And they have to figure out what the supply side looks like as the app grows in total users. If you go from 1.5 million to 7.5 million users in a year, you don't necessarily take the comic books from 60,000 to 400,000. It's very risky to do that. But these are some of the things that they're going to have to figure out. And then also now, again, at their scale and size, there's less room to make big mistakes. And so they just have to make sure that they are early and that whatever it is that they're launching is working. So both.
So before you were mentioning that people will have $1 to $3 or $5 experiences, and one of the things that came up with me that I thought of was Among Us, where you could spend like $2 for a toilet paper hat or a crab that follows you around, and I think it's representation of self. So I have an either or question for you. Do you think that Vivi should, in the Viviverse, put out stuff that's like, oh, this is Vivi toilet paper or Vivi art or Vivi whatever to put into your house? Or do you think that Vivi is just a conglomeration of their partnerships and that no one would really buy that, and that might be seen as a failure if nobody bought it, so they shouldn't buy it?
Well, you can always supply. You can always control supply. You can test things out before you fly with it. You can run betas and see how consumers behave before you take big risks. I personally think that the metaverse is going to be a place where there's as much replication of what happens in real life as possible. I don't know how that will play out, but I have a feeling that some of the things that you mentioned will be important. So, it'll be a balance. It'll be a balance between everyday stuff and collectible stuff, just like we deal with every day. And I think that the more it mirrors, the more it reflects reality, the better.
That was good. Thank you.
I will say one thing. There is one other thought, which is, you buy the toilet paper on Vivi, and who knows what benefits it comes with. Maybe Charmin does a deal with them, and all of a sudden, ding dong, Amazon's delivered a special Vivi physical Charmin for you. I don't know. Like, who knows the types of utility that you can deal with when you're dealing with something on, blockchain.
I would love that so much.
Yeah, I actually, so this is actually a question, well, a debate or conversation that I was having with some other influencers in the community a while back. And since you're a collector, I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. So we were trying to understand from a collector's perspective the rarity system and how important that is. And because it's something Vivi made up, is that going to be respected long term? So, or are people going to come in like Marvel Comics #1? Yeah, the secret rare is more scarce, but the original cover is the common. So, do you see at any point in time where a collector would prefer the common over the secret rare, or what's your thoughts on that? Or is it just like the scarcity is very important?
No, I mean, I think scarcity drives everything. That's just the traditional laws of economics. The more scarce something is, the more people are willing to pay for it. Especially if it's part of a brand that you have an affinity for. But I've talked about market cap before and how market cap can drive decision making. So if you have a common and a rare and a secret rare, or common, uncommon, rare, secret rare, and the total market cap for the commons is $50,000, but the market cap for the uncommons is $300,000. It could be an imbalance where the commons are either significantly underpriced or the uncommons are unusually overpriced. But usually it's a positive if you can find something that seems disproportionately low from a market cap standpoint. Rarity is very important, always. But the bigger issue is, can you find an arbitrage opportunity by identifying something that's been under coveted or inexplicably underappreciated.
Okay, thank you for that response. I'm definitely newer to collecting, so yeah, I don't know what everything is that people actually care about and consider when it comes to that all the time. So yeah, that was just like a discussion that we were having.
Well, so if you have a common, and I'll make the math very straightforward, and there's 10 of the common, and you have an uncommon and there's 5. But the 10 common are trading at $1 each. So the market cap is $10 for the common. And the 5 uncommon are trading at $10 each. So the market cap is 50. So you have a 5x market cap for the uncommon. It seems like there may be an opportunity in the common because people are disproportionately valuing the rarity in a way that seems almost unfair. And again, logic drives almost everything. So it always depends. If I'm looking at something, I'm looking for an opportunity. I'll look at those specific issues and say, looks like uncommon is significantly undervalued here. Maybe I'll buy a couple. That sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Definitely understand. Any other questions, or should we take some from the chat?
Say we could definitely move to Twitter, but I did just have like one other question, and that's we're finally making the move to Immutable X. Like we're finally joining the rest of the NFT world, right? Like we did it, fam. All right. I guess what does that mean to you, right? Like you were here before any of us. Like what does this next step mean to you as an investor, as a fan, like, and how do you think Vivi NFTs are going to do joining the rest of the NFT world now that we can finally do so?
I think it's very, very interesting. Okay. There's certainly a benefit to a walled garden, meaning that Vivi is the everything and you can't break out of it and that's your world. And there's also a huge benefit to being in the grander universe where there's some big whales floating around who wouldn't mind buying something for a number of ETH versus a number of dollars. It's almost like it's play money when you're talking about ETH. They're going to pay $93 ETH for a Bored Ape Yacht Club floor. That's 93 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do that in human money and it's $240,000, you go like, wow, that's something. That's the floor on a 10,000 piece item. Anyways, the point of the matter is, I think that the benefits are broad, more exposure, more mainstream, bigger numbers on certain collectibles, the opportunity for things that we're trading for X to trade for many, many X. And from a token perspective, going to Ethereum, I think how many holders are there of Omi? It's like close to 200,000, right? So let's just say it's 200,000. I think it's somewhere between 150 and 200. But if there's 200,000 holders of Omi, do you know what a pain in the butt it has been to trade Omi? And try communicating with people that don't generally trade crypto and tell them to go to Coinbase, transfer it to Tether, go to MetaMask, go to another thing, download the Go chain because it's very unusual and hard to understand. And then, people don't know what any of that means. They just go like, what? And the user of Vivi in general is not the traditional crypto person, although they're becoming much more knowledgeable on the underlying stuff. So I think going to Ethereum is going to bring in a lot of the more traditional crypto folks. And I think it will also move the Vivi people closer to the traditional Vivi folks, closer to being more crypto-like in their own thinking and their own ways of making purchases. Now, long term, that means, in my opinion, way easier access to the token, way more adoption, and demand is a good thing for the price of a tokenized asset.
So My next one is, maybe it's my last, because I know we're might be running short on time here. In the 48 years that you've been alive, what is, do you think, the most astounding fact that either has happened or is currently happening, and why?
Wow, the most astounding fact in 48 years. Well, the fact that we've blown up what is conventional wisdom about humans and about the things that we form communities around. You know, we have a hundreds of thousands of years track record of figuring out ways to separate ourselves from one another. People migrate away from another group of people because they can't deal with them anymore. And then 20,000 years later, they look different. And now, because they look different, they look at each other and they say, well, we can't have anything in common. We look different. And we've blown all that shit up because we're trading things and becoming good friends and recognizing that community is bigger than genetics and that, our possibilities and potential is greater than genetics. And I think that's the most remarkable thing that's happened in my life. I mean, again, 48 years before I was born, you're talking about, oh my gosh, like 1925. And in 1925, we all know it was a very different universe at that time. And their ability to imagine a world like this would have been absolutely unfathomable. So anyways, like I said, I think that, look, the good news about all of this is humans may look a lot better to robots by the time they're sapient. If robots are looking at us and going, wow, they're dividing over these things, they may not find us all valuable. But if we're not, maybe we won't be so damn self-destructive.
I think so too. You reminded me of a quote from Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z, where he's talking to Gohan, and Gohan asks him why he hasn't gone back to Namek 2 with all the other Namekians, and he says, "Family's more about more than what you look like and where you come from." And I was like, "Whoa!" Like 10-year-old me was just blown away by that. Does robots or AI, or maybe like, does that worry you, or do you think like with Neuralink and everything? What are your biggest fears about them?
Well, I mean, it worries me because humans can be very self-destructive, and we've never had the reliance on digital things the way we currently do, and the processing power and speed of electronic things is well beyond anything that we could ever conceive of. Now, we can come up with logical thought faster than the fastest computer, and we can be very multidimensional. But at the speed at which, look, special things can be specialized, and you could have a unit that's the greatest thinker in the world in this particular way. But because it's not necessarily three-dimensional thought, all it takes is a little overstepping to create some real problems. So my hope is we recognize the power that we're going to be yielding with these electronic devices, and that, that somehow, some way, the concept of electronic devices doing things on their own is never something that really comes fully into fruition. But look, what happens when you have something that feels and thinks and asking you to be considered the same, but it's able and capable of processing it 1,000 times the way you can process? I don't know. I kind of like where we are right now. I would just love it if humans could. I would just love it if humans could figure it out before we have to face these types of really challenging situations.
So no Neuralink for you.
So I don't know how much longer we wanted to keep this going. We did have a few more questions, and then we have some people on Twitter who actually wanted to get up on stage and ask a few questions, I guess. So it's up to you all. Are we going to call it, or do you want to take a few more?
Yeah, let's do some Twitter, and then maybe we'll do it for about 10 more minutes, and that'd be awesome.
Okay, we can go with the Twitter. Okay, so if you're on YouTube right now, you actually won't be able to hear what they're saying on Twitter, but you'll understand the context through the answer. So let's pull up Arrow. Hey, Arrow, man. How's it going?
Yo, Cavell. Everyone, I appreciate you giving me the floor, man. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Jeremy, appreciate hearing you tonight, man. It's very good to have you in this community. Learned a lot from you, as well as all the rest of you. I see a lot of the YouTubers that I watch, Taps, Randy, Dan, I see all y'all in there. Shout out to y'all. But Jeremy, I wanted to ask you about the seriousness of when it comes to one thing about building a company is putting the right elements in place, especially when you have something that's growing and has legs. Do you think us as fans of the app, investors in the application, do you think that we should take Ecomi just 10 times more seriously about the utility case when they get to the point to when they hire maybe a chief utility officer or someone that in their camp, besides Dan and David, because they're the CEOs, of course, they see over everything, but having that person in place that works with the licensors that focus on bringing utility to the different brands that come out. Do you think that when Omi gets to that point to where they actually announce that they're putting someone in that place, do you think that then we should really know that bringing utility as far as most of the brands out, we should really know that that's actually at the forefront of their mind?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Essentially, you're saying as they grow and as they take on additional people, should we be watching the moves that they make and based on the moves that they make, assessing and asserting, what we think, certain things, like they brought in a chief utility officer or whatever, would that be an indicator of something? And the answer is, if they're building a multi-billion-dollar company that has, a multi-billion-dollar market cap on a token, they need to continue to grow out their infrastructure in order to achieve these things. And absolutely, you can read a lot into the people that you surround yourself with, for sure. So I will tell you this. I have really valued the people on that team so far. I think they've been really open and accessible. And however they grow it, I sure hope that they maintain that sort of community spirit, because you can bring in some heavy hitters that are like so damn serious and not relatable. And I think they've kept it really relatable so far. But yeah, they're gonna need some really, really smart people to do the things that they need to do over the course of time. And they'll do that, I'm sure.
Appreciate that. I just wanted your insight on it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, my friend. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the question, man. Let's get Prop up here. Yo, Prop, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Really, really, really legendary discussion going on, man. Thanks for having this space again, bro. Taps, what's going on, Randy? Uncle Jeremy, nice to talk to you again, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, like every time you come to spaces and pop in, we usually like have like bigger fish to fry, and I don't get a chance to ask you about wrestling, man. And I just want to ask you a wrestling question.
Yeah, let's go. Let's talk wrestling. I love it. I'm in. I love it.
Yeah, man.
Is it about Danhausen?
No, it's not, man. I'm gonna go back.
All right, let's go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to give you a bit of a head start on this because it's kind of a crazy question. Like, I want to ask you what your most memorable / greatest matches you've ever seen. For me, it was The Rock versus Hollywood Hogan.
Oh wow!
Yeah, man, it was like this. There's passing of the torch matches, but then there's passing of the torch matches where they put on a good performance, right? And like cross generation, stuff. And for me, that's the one that just pops into my head. So, what do you think? What you got in mind? What is like most memorable, greatest match that you can remember right now?
Wow. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, when I was a little kid, I grew up in the South, and specifically in Memphis, Tennessee, and seeing like Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman and some of the wars that was going on back then. It seemed so real. Like we all really felt like Andy Kaufman was this crazy New York guy who came into our little city and was challenging our, local hometown guy, whether it was Coco Beware or Jerry Lawler, whoever it may be. Like we did not want those guys to, we didn't want those big city guys to mess with our guys. And I just remember really enjoying that whole thing. The other thing, back in the day, like a vintage match for me when I was a kid, again, back in Mississippi, Ric Flair came to town. He was the NWA heavyweight champion. And I had a portable camera, and I found my way all the way up to the entryway where the wrestler was going to come out when the music hit. So Ric Flair comes out, and I hit him with a flash of my camera, and he pushed me, and I fell backwards, and I took a second shot as I was falling back, and I was like 11 or 12 years old. And I had that picture forever. I've got to find it. You see his hand right in my camera, and he's like screaming at me. And it was awesome. It was such a big moment. I told Vince McMahon about this one time. And when I was actually much younger, and we were relaunching his brand, and he thought it was really funny. But at WWE, like later on, like WrestleMania 20, I was making their product at that time, and we had launched Classic Superstars the year before, and Ruthless Aggression and Adrenaline and all those great brands. And the triple threat match was Triple H, Chris Benoit, and Shawn Michaels. And that was a huge moment because I was sitting in the box with the WWE brass, and I was 31 years old, and I had their whole brand in my hands. It was a big deal. And I, we really leveraged the strength of that roster, but the classic roster, and brought that whole brand back and changed the entire way they look at the alumni. But those are some of the big ones that I remember.
Yeah, that's pretty great, man. I gotta say, Shawn Michaels is still my favorite wrestler of all time. I think he's the most important image-wise versus how he performed. So that is a great match to point out in a more modern for the time. Yeah, man, that's pretty good. And I do remember the Lawler versus Andy Kaufman. And I was wondering if you caught that remake with Jim Carrey, how he went into character. He actually, they actually brought Lawler onto the set to recreate that whole scenario in a movie that Jim Carrey, where he played Andy Kaufman.
Yep.
I wonder if you saw that. Jim Carrey made that film. I think it was basically a documentary about being Andy Kaufman, and they did all the behind the scenes and they kind of, you know, they kind of threw hands, but behind scenes because of how serious Jim Carrey got.
Oh yeah,
and that was really interesting.
I need to see that. I mean, I remember seeing Man on the Moon. I need to see the documentary behind it. And I will tell you, when we were making Classic Superstars, Jerry Lawler gave me Andy Kaufman's information, his family information, and it was the oddest interaction I've ever had. I don't know if it was staged or not, but it almost felt like I was talking to Andy. And so when we did the deal, it was uncertain as to whether it was the estate or Andy himself. And it was a very, very interesting experience for me. But you know, Andy Kaufman had died many years earlier, theoretically. Yeah, it was a crazy, crazy time. Interesting stuff, man. But I mean, look, I had the benefit of going to dinner with Bobby Heenan, Captain Lou, you know, all the some very fascinating 1980s guys that when we brought them back 20 years after they had kind of retired.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Thanks for the story, Jeremy.
Of course.
Hey, thanks for coming up. Okay, we'll take one more. We have
How about three more?
Three more. Okay.
Let's go.
Let's bring up JD. Let's see. Hey, yo, what's up, JD? Yeah, you here? You might be having technical issues right now.
Sorry, JD. I was dying to hear from you, JD. It's okay. You can send us a PM and we'll figure it out.
Well, Cavell brings up the next one. I have to say that WrestleMania 20 was my favorite WrestleMania. Eddie Guerrero against Kurt. Oh my God! Sorry, I'm fanboying here.
It was huge. It was awesome.
Okay, we have all these coming up. Yo, what's going on, man?
Yo, not much, guys. I'm just chiming in here, but I just want to say, Jeremy Padawer, bro, you are a legend, bro. You're like
Thanks,
a
man.
huge anchor to this community, and yeah, we just love and support you, bro.
Thank you.
And you're one of the most humblest individuals, so I appreciate you, bro. That's all I want to say.
That's all. Oh, bro, that is really kind of you, my friend. Thank you. That means a lot to me. You filled my whole heart up for real. I'm like flying right now. Thank you, brother.
All right. Any more questions? You all can request to come up if you all have some questions for Jeremy. We're gonna take like two more, a couple more. Doesn't look like we have any.
Well, Adi's, that reminded me of the time where Alex Trebek had like one of his last weeks, or he just announced he was sick on Jeopardy, and somebody was messaging, or somebody was writing as his last answer for the double Jeopardy. He's like, "What is we love you, Alex?" I was like, "Oh, that's so sweet."
Listen, it's, you know, look, it's people appreciating you know, a career or things that you've done does feel really good. I'll tell you that. So.
Okay, looks like we have a couple of people up right now. Mike was up. What's going on, Mike?
Hey, what's going on, guys? I appreciate y'all having me on. Hey, I just wanted to ask Jeremy a quick question. What do you feel like your biggest leap was in your success?
Oh man, my biggest leap in my success was leaping away from something very, very, very secure for something completely unknown. Turned out to be, like I said, the roller coaster ride of my life, but it ended up being something that resulted in tremendous financial outcome and kind of solidified a bit of a legacy in terms of, you know, being able to communicate. It put me in a position where I can communicate with people and maybe inspire them to take chances on themselves. But that was it. That moment. I was 39 years old. my whole world was lined up perfectly, and I walked from it. And that is something I don't necessarily recommend. I don't not recommend it, but I just want you to know that it's possible. You don't have to be born rich. You don't have to be born. You can, look, and I don't know if this is applicable to everywhere in the world. It certainly is applicable in the United States. And I think that the world is becoming more and more and more favorable for brains and nothing else. Just whatever it is in your brain, whatever it is in your motivation, your desire, your passion, your intelligence, your resilience. These are all the things that matter the most. For me, that was the moment. That was the biggest moment.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate it. Real quick, yeah, I've been in the military for 12 years, active duty.
Thank you.
I'm looking to make that leap outside of it, and I appreciate the inspiration. Thanks, guys.
What do you want to? So wait, don't leave. First of all, thank you.
I'm still on.
No, man, thank you so much for being that brave person. 12 years ago, jumping into active duty means that you walked in a very uncertain time. You're a very heroic person.
No, I appreciate that. I've been recruiting for probably about 6 years now, so I'm looking to take those skills out and do things on my own, and possibly corporate world, whatever it leads me to.
I think that you're going to be very successful. All the things that you've learned. I mean, the thing about the business world is that it's never life or death. I mean, you might watch Billions, or you might watch Yellowstone and think that it is, but you've already experienced some of the most challenging things that you will ever experience in your life. Now it's about team, and it's about money or legacy, and you've already been through the hardest stuff.
I appreciate it, man. Hey, y'all doing great things. I appreciate what y'all do. Y'all have a great night.
You too.
Have a great night.
Next we'll have QOTD. What's going on?
Hey, what's up, brother? So I'm at work right now. My buddy Lewis is the one that put me on this little chat thing. It's my first time being on here. And Jeremy, bro, I just want to tell you, every answer you gave back is just so honest. So I can just tell, bro, it's like you can hear your intent, and you can hear you just want to tell people. And bro, it's super inspiring. I'm on here for one reason. It's like, so you had something to do with Squishmallows. My girlfriend is completely obsessed with them. My apartment is full of Squishmallows, brother. Like, I kid you not. You can see my picture. Those are like my personal collections, because I have my own as well. But so that's going to go off to the question, basically, is like, where do you see the whole Squishmallow community or Squishmallow collectibles going? And obviously there's a lot of Beanie Baby documentaries about like the rise and fall, and like the kind of like the peak where everyone made a lot of money, and then where it kind of just became nothing. Yeah. Do you think like the NFT space is kind of where it's going to go, or do you, because I know you're like a very physical collector. So like, I just kind of want your opinion as to like where you see the whole Squishmallow thing going in the next couple of years.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It means a lot to me that you stuck around, and that you came up on stage, and I think it's amazing that you share collecting with your girlfriend, and that really bodes well, because life, if you spend a lot of time with somebody, and you spend a half a life with them or a full life with them, you need to have things in common, and you need to have a similar worldview. And people who collect similar things tend to be a lot alike. I think it's really cool. Squishmallows has been a phenomenal brand. We're in our 5th year. We bought the brand 2.5 years ago, and it's really just kind of blown up. What I will tell you is we're treating it like a franchise, and not just a plush or a collectible. We have tens of licensees now. We launched the Roblox channel. We did a deal with CAA. There's going to be movies, TV shows. It's like, think of it like a Hello Kitty potential sort of thing. The thing about the thing about Beanie Babies back in the day, and it's a very different business now, obviously, is that back in the day, a lot of what Beanie Babies was predicated on was secondary market. And so people were buying and selling and making money, and people were buying it and like, oh, it's gonna be for my children's college fund, and it didn't live up to that long term for various reasons. Obviously, they have a wonderful business today, but at the time, it was really based on that secondary market. Squishmallows, interestingly enough, has always been based on love and community and hugging the damn thing, and it's been more of a collectible toy versus collecting for value. Even though there's some of that, it's not the overriding factor, and because of that, I believe it's going to have serious longevity because people collect it because it's in their heart versus their pocketbook. And I think it will evolve over time. I think it will evolve into a full-on franchise where you're experiencing it much the way you experience other large brands, again, like Hello Kitty. But very thankful that you're a part of that community. Very thankful.
Yeah, thank you for that, brother. That was super cool. My girl's in a loser shit when she finds out who I talked to today. But yeah, man, she loves this stuff. She's a huge advocate for it. Like, if there's any type of like affiliates or anything like that, let me know. I know she would be 1,000% with it to work anything Squishmallow related. But yeah, again, thank you for everything, brother. Appreciate your time, and thank you for answering my question.
Of course, thank you very much.
All right, next here we have OT time. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? Salute to the Vivi fam. I'm glad you guys brought this space. What a great opportunity to talk with Jeremy and share our thoughts and ideas. Quick question for you. I haven't found the faces to a lot of these brands that I'm seeing today on Vivi until I got into Vivi. To have the ability to talk to someone like you, or at some point, hopefully an Alcon or a David Yu, is extraordinary. My question is, would you say is the opportunity that you thought you got? What is your best opportunity where you got to speak with a big mind or someone who opened up your mind into something that you wanted to do for yourself in the long run, or with your business, or whatever it is that you wanted to do?
Well, that's great. Wow, I've been very fortunate in that, being in the world of licensing and working with other intellectual property. I've had the opportunity to engage with some incredible creators like, Jim Davis of Garfield, and, Mr. Ishihara, Pokemon, Al Khan, he's not my mentor because I never worked for him, but we're kind of like living the same career. We're kind of known for the same things. He's like, it's funny. He called me during the course of this thing. It's the reason why I went blank for a second, because he called me on WhatsApp and it disrupted my entire phone, which is the reason why I went blank for a second. So I X'd him out. I went, later, Al, click. But there's been so many people and so many experiences. To boil it down is kind of challenging, but I'll think about it for a second and say that I think the impact that I've had from the consumer side has been greater than the impact that I've had from the creator side. And what I mean by that is, like, conversations like this hit me much harder in the heart than anything. So probably like interactions with people who are engaging with the product have been as instrumental in my career as anything. But all right, I'll give you one. So when I went to Jack Pacific after Mattel, and one of the reasons why I went there was the WWE brand, and that was a brand that I absolutely loved, and I couldn't believe I was going to be able to manage it from a collectible and toy side. Some of the other brands we had was like Dragon Ball, which is awesome. But I walked into the CEO's office, and his name was Jack Friedman, and I didn't realize that there was a toy brand called LJN in the 80s. And they put out the first wrestling figures, these big rubber wrestling figures with no articulation. And I didn't realize that Jack was the J in LJN. And so we talked a lot. We talked all the time. I was in my late 20s and he was close to 70. And I would go into his office and sit down, and he didn't treat me like I was a kid. He treated me like, and I asked him questions like, Jack, what is it like to be rich? And like, what's it like to have a career where people know you for stuff that you've done that's kind of changed the landscape? And he would give me some great answers. And one of the things he said to me was, to the answer very specifically, Jack, what is it like to be rich? Because I wanted to be wealthy. I'm not going to lie, I wanted to be. And he said, I'll tell you, he said, having wealth magnifies your underlying personality. He said, if you're a bad spirited person, you can do a tremendous amount of damage. And if you're a good spirited person, you can become a philanthropist and really help the world. He said, whatever it is that you really are, whatever you really are gets magnified. Like, not your front, not like who you propose yourself to be, but what you really are. And that was a big moment for me. And another big moment for me was when there was a pet products company that we acquired. When I say we, it wasn't we, because I was a junior executive. I didn't have any equity in the company. And they brought in the entrepreneur that we had acquired, and the guy was this Irish guy. And I said to him, I'm going to be very honest with you. I was like, I've never worked in pet products. I was like more of a toy and collectible guy. And he said, it doesn't matter, mate. He said, it doesn't matter what you know. He said, all that matters is that you know people that know stuff. And that was a huge moment for me. Truly was a huge moment for me, because it was very freeing for me, because it meant that no matter what in life, as long as I knew people that knew things, nobody was counting on me to know everything. In fact, part of leadership is knowing how to work with a bunch of people and knowing how to manage them. But those were two big moments for me.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your answers, man. I feel the same way about your first answer. I feel like we as a community have the obligation to inspire each other and to push ideas back and forth. Hence why a lot of the people in the space like to get in these spaces and share ideas. But thanks for answering my question. I appreciate it. And the story was awesome, man. Thanks.
My pleasure.
All right, we have 5 more. Do you want to take them, or do you want to?
5 more. All right. How about we do? All right, we're gonna do 5 more. They're probably gonna be a little faster, and then we'll cap it at 5. And okay. Let's go. I don't want to leave anybody out.
All right, so these are the last ones here. I'll bring you all up, and you can go one at a time. Quick question. Okay, so we're gonna start with Bale. What's going on, man?
Oh my God. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for the space, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak up. First of all, Jeremy, thank you for sharing your story with us. At some point, I had goosebumps because I can relate to some of the stuff you told. However, actually, I just wanted to come up and say thank you. I still have a small question.
Okay.
And that is related to the comic side. You said that maybe the commons are undervalued due to the market cap. Do you think that maybe based on Marvel 1 comics, maybe like, let's say 1 year from now, we won't see any of these in the secondary market? Do you think that's possible, considering that we have like 30 or 40K editions?
I think that whenever you have that many units of something, that you'll always have secondary market sales. I do believe, and when I said common versus uncommon, and I was making a comparison without specifically noting a particular comic book, but kind of like letting you know that my belief is that if you look at market caps and you see something that seems really out of whack, generally speaking, logic can guide you towards potentially creating value for yourself. Like, so if you looked at the uncommons versus the common and you saw the market cap on the uncommon was 5 times more, and I'm not saying it is, I'm saying if it was, then you might identify that the common has got a real serious value proposition. Generally speaking, that's the way things work. That's the way economics works out. But it doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. It just means that's generally the case. But yeah, that's a great way to possibly derive a benefit. And I think that the more people that get into the space, I think the more people will be using analytical tools like that to determine where to invest.
Thank you very much for your answer. And I just want to let you know that you still have some friends here in Germany.
Awesome.
And we are kind of a small group of around 500 people, but we educate them day by day.
Oh, that's great.
And thank you very much.
All right, next here we'll go with T Muggsy. What's going on?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for letting me ask a question. I have like a 2-part question for Jeremy.
Okay.
Knowing that you work with Halo and the new Halo TV show is coming out, could you see any possibility of NFTs coming out with TV shows? And not just that, maybe with game passes and just actually buying games in general. And second part of the question goes here. I know you guys want this to be, you want kids to enter the space. And entering the NFT space for a kid is probably pretty difficult right now. And there has to be almost no barrier of entry. Do you see NFTs being, especially entry NFTs being free and or having a very, very low barrier of entry?
Yeah, great questions. So part one, I do believe that there will be reward systems around NFTs, and I think that maybe I'm answering part two first, but I think that reward systems, continuity programs, those types of things, especially if you're dealing with a blockchain that doesn't have any gas fees, allows for a great way to engage with a brand or a person that you have a fandom for. So I certainly see that. I see a lot more low priced or free things that actually have value because it takes time versus money to achieve. And then to answer your first question, content is another way. Again, it's an expenditure of time, and if you can be identified as someone who's spending time doing something, you can be marketed to. And I think that, again, NFTs allow you to identify that commitment. But it would require really low price, no gas fee type NFTs to achieve that. But not all NFTs are going to be collectible NFTs. Some are just going to be markers for achievements and various things like that. So the answer is, yes, I could definitely see a world where content has a reward system baked in, and yes, I can see that sort of system being appealing to younger people, but their relationship with the NFT is different than a traditional collectible.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for the answers.
My pleasure.
All right. Next we have All Tech Kev. What's up?
What up, Omi family? Grateful that you guys hold these spaces. I'm always grateful. Cavell, grateful for you, even though, you know what I'm saying, we had a little spat with you, but we grateful for you regardless. So my question is centered around the success that Vivi is having right now. So one of my, I guess, like silent worries has always been wondering if there's a group of rich people on the sidelines just watching the success of Vivi. And I was wondering, in your opinion, what are the chances that another Vivi-like platform might set up shop and land some agreements with some of these IP brands that Vivi has? Like, what are the chances of that happening? And what are the chances of them landing, let's say, comic books, digital comic books similar to Vivi? That's always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Because it kind of worries me about the future. I mean, it always happens. Like, if someone is successful, you're bound to be copied. So I was wondering, what's your opinion towards that?
Well, that was a very intelligent question, man. And the chances are 100%. How about that? It's not even 99.9. It's 100% that there's wealth watching and that there's investments that will be made and being made in competing. But, let me just be clear about something. That's the way it always is. Whenever there's an area of business that you cannot entirely protect that has significant growth and massive identifiable users, you'll have other competitors enter the space. And in a situation like this, it's almost impossible for that not to occur, because the margins are very good on digital assets, and that IP holders are very hungry to share in that. And competition generally is good for people who own franchises. Now, on the positive end for Vivi, first mover advantage is a concept in business that goes back to the very beginnings of business. If you're first, you usually establish a position that's very, very difficult to overcome. It's the reason why Coca-Cola has been the number one soft drink for 100+ years, and McDonald's has been the number one burger chain for 60 years, and Heinz ketchup, and so on and so forth. Competition will make Vivi better. Competition is good for markets. It won't necessarily impact valuations. It won't necessarily have a negative connotation. It really comes down to, how do you react to competition? How do you compete? And these things are absolutely positively in the future for Vivi to have those types of fights. I can tell you, those are the fights I've been fighting for 20+ years being in the toy industry. And sometimes it's fierce. I mean, actually, I'll give you an example. The other day, Mattel announced that the Disney Princess line is going from Hasbro to Mattel, after going from Mattel to Hasbro in 2014. That had a big impact on the stocks of both companies. Does it end Hasbro? Definitely not. Does it make Mattel unachievably big and hard to battle? No. It's just the nature. And you know what? Those two have been the two biggest toy companies for a long, long time. And then here we are, Jazzwares, getting bigger and bigger and badder and badder. But competition's a good thing. It is. So to answer your question, it's a 100% chance that that's happening. 100, not 99.99, 100.
All right. So last we have Mercury. What's going on, man?
Hey guys, really appreciate you talking, Jeremy. Everything you're saying is very inspiring, and I'm someone in my 20s, and I'm really interested on your take for work-life balance.
Oh.
You know, because I really want to achieve a lot of things, and I kind of don't want to leave people behind. So I want to know what you'll take to bring these people up as well.
Oh, that's a lovely, lovely question. Work-life balance is challenging if you want to have significant success. If you go into an older category, a mature category, it's hard to have work-life balance and achieve something significant financially. You can have a very steady life, but to have something that just kind of really big in a mature category that's been around for years and years and years, you're competing with a lot of people who are willing to sacrifice everything when it comes to work to maybe have the shot at success, financial, whatever their version of financial success is. But that changes very drastically when you're entering into new categories, like, you know, digital goods or apps when they were kicking off, or whatever the frontier is. If you're brave enough to be on the frontier, the irony is there's a lot of risk, but you can have more of a work-life balance because the opportunities are greater and your opportunity to hit it is greater. It just all comes down to your stomach for all of that. And for me, I started out in a very entrepreneurial new category of business, found my way into one of the oldest categories of business ever. And now I invest all over the place in both new and old categories of business. My work-life balance has not been particularly terrific, but my work is in a category that I absolutely love. So that helps. My work-life balance has gotten better as I've gotten older and more financially successful. But like I said, most people probably would have rode off into the sunset. So the downside of loving what you do is that you tend to do it. You know, if there is a downside to that, you know, but look, I love doing this. You know, I could be downstairs right now petting the dog, but to me, this is part of the life part. This doesn't feel like part of the work part. So anyways, it's just, I realize it's a long answer, but I just want you to know that, you know, either choose something you love or put yourself in a newer category of business so that you can potentially have work-life balance while that world blows up in a positive way.
Appreciate you, man. That's just a really good answer, and I really, really do appreciate it. So yeah, best of luck, man, in the future, and
Yeah,
have a good one.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right, and that was the last one. I think that's a wrap. So thank you all for coming on. Thanks for joining us, Jeremy, Taps, and Randy. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, we know how busy you are and everything you're building and doing and all the time. So giving, 3 hours pretty much to the community and to us, really thank you, because we've had a lot of AMAs, but this feels almost like life lessons with Uncle Jeremy, and like questions all over the board, right? Like, so a lot of the ideology and the advice that you've given us in these 3 hours is incredibly valuable. So seriously, like, thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. I have to tell you that I really enjoy talking about life philosophies and really love talking to people who are trying to determine, what it is they're going to do and who they are and how that fits in. I would do this anytime, because I do know that those moments and hearing from people that you might appreciate or respect, or maybe in some ways want to emulate, like, I'm just telling you, I told you 2 little moments in my life that changed my life. You never know. Like, maybe you say something to someone and 20 years later, they're communicating how much that meant to them. And I just having a forum like this to talk about not just Vivi or Omi, but talk about, life is, I love that. I really do. So I'm deeply appreciative for you guys giving me that forum. We could do life lessons with Uncle Jeremy anytime. I'm just letting you know. Anytime.
Would definitely love to do this more often with you. Like you answered these questions amazingly, and I think a lot of us are gonna probably watch back and still pick up some things that you said that we might not have picked up the first time. So definitely appreciate you taking this time and spending it with the community. Randy, any closing remarks?
Yeah, what you just said reminded me of what my friend Justin said on my podcast last night. When he was like really young and really shy, he went to Disney, and the girl that was playing as Ariel in Disney World just said hi to him and made him feel like really, really good. And that's what brought him to work at Disney, was to be able to go and do that for other kids. And I'm sure you know this already, but this means a lot to us. And I'm sure there are other people that you're inspiring tonight, and it just means a lot that you're here. So thank you.
It means the world to me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Randy. I appreciate it. Man, you guys, what an awesome forum. I got to tell you, this has meant a lot to me. I am so appreciative. And seriously, we can talk about Vivi, we can talk about Omi, we can talk about life stuff. I'm totally down anytime. My heart is completely full. I'm so appreciative.
Thanks. Thank you so much once again, man. And we're gonna end it here, you all. Both Twitter and YouTube. We're gonna be ended on both here. So thank you all for coming through and joining this with us. Hopefully you all got as much out of this as I think all three of us did. Thank you so much for your time once again. We'll catch you all later.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.